Good morning, everybody. Or morning, I said that before. It's a good afternoon now, and it's nearly spring. We look out the window, Mark, and the sun is shining.
Glorious day in sunny Geelong.
Yes, it sure is, and many more to come, and a big football game probably being played by the time this goes to air.
Yes, it will.
So that'll be interesting. Today we are interviewing Scott Andersen, and Scott is the director of Worrells, and Worrells are an insolvency and restructuring company, and very well known around Australia. And Scott has been in Geelong for quite a while now, and certainly I'm looking forward to this because I'm sure he has, in his role, he has seen it all. I guess we could call it the good, the bad and the ugly of it all. So welcome, Scott, and we, as I say, we're looking forward to hearing from you today.
So, Scott, where did life begin? Where were you born? What did you school, uni? Tell us the Scott
yeah,
story.
sure. Well, firstly, thanks for having me along today. It's quite an experience and grateful to have it. And hopefully the Cats come home with a win on Friday evening, but that'll remain to be seen. So I guess my background all began in country New South Wales, a little town called Goulburn.
Oh, good town.
Yeah, it was a great town. So was fortunate enough to spend all my younger years there up until the end of Year 12 and studied. I probably wasn't the most studious kid growing up, although I did apply myself when it needed to be the case, and probably had a bit more of a passion for playing sport, all things team sport. And then we ended up, I was very fortunate to have been sent to the private school in town, which I'm very grateful for my parents for, because growing up we didn't have a lot of money, and so I don't know how they made it work, but they made it work, and I'm very fortunate to have done that because I've got a lot of lifelong friends out of it, as you do at school. But then some of my friends have gone to do some pretty remarkable things, and which has been good. But it was interesting that I've got Danish heritage.
Okay.
So Dad immigrated back in would have been early 70s off memory. And at the end of Year 12 is his sister and husband came and stayed with us for 6 weeks. And this was about the time where the acceptance letters were coming out from universities. And so I'd been accepted to the ANU in Canberra to do a Bachelor of Commerce, and I was adamant that I was going to defer for 12 months, and I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do for that 12 months, and Mum and Dad weren't too happy with that because they thought that I'd lose a bit of focus as to going back to uni. So they basically gave me the option it was my 18th birthday, coming up in the following February. So they said to me, option one is you go out and you get a full-time job, and you remain in that full-time job until you start at university in 2001. Or alternatively is for your 18th birthday party, instead of an 18th birthday party, we will pay for a flight to Denmark, and your auntie and uncle have said that they will allow you to live in their house, but you've got to pay your way.
Not a hard choice coming here.
It was an instant yes from me, and so they returned back to Denmark, and then a couple of weeks later, I was on a flight to Denmark as wouldn't even have been 18 at that point in time, so I was just shy of 18, and essentially I spent the Christmas trying to get my bearings and understand what the world was like over there, and then quickly had to go out and get a job, which was quite interesting because it's a non-English speaking country.
And you didn't speak Danish.
I did not speak Danish, which is a bit of a shortcoming on my side, and it's something that I regret not actually learning from Dad as a young guy. But it was interesting because the work that I was doing over there was, as a first job ever, as I had 2 jobs. I was working in the first instance as a labourer for a landscape gardener, and thankfully for him, more so than me, is that he was fluent in English. And it was a great experience because he lived in Australia for a few years while he was a young chap, and he was just a really lovely guy. Gave me a great opportunity, and I saw some amazing things with him, and it really didn't dawn on me until a couple of years later at some of the places I actually worked with him at. And one of those places was, and I don't know if anyone listening would be big fans of English or Danish football, but we were doing some gardening and landscaping at a house, which you could see Sweden from his backyard or from this house backyard. And I was very flippant as a youngster and didn't really take much notice of it. And then subsequently, thinking back to that, started Googling whose house this was and found out that I'd actually been working at Mikael Laudrup's house. And again, that didn't really sort of stick with me, and then found out that he was probably one of, or he's touted as being one of the greatest soccer players or football players that got around. So it was a bit of an experience. And the other job I had over there was, of all things, was a gardener at a local amusement park. And that was fascinating because the lead for the gardening team was this lovely old chap called Hans, and he would have been 60-ish, maybe a bit older, and he knew not an iota of English. And so trying to give me instructions to do tasks was interesting, and me trying to give him feedback as to whether or not those jobs had been completed was the next challenge. But I do recall my first day there, they had a pond in the middle of the park, and as with most ponds, they've got some pretty steep walls on them, and I was sent out on the ride-on lawnmower to go out and mow the sides of the pond or the lake. And I quickly found myself in a bit of a jam when I'd gone directly down the side of the pond and couldn't manoeuvre the ride-on lawnmower to get back up because of the gradient. So I then had to quickly go back and explain to my non-English speaking boss that the lawnmower was about to end up at the bottom of the pond. But that was interesting. I think a lot of me has been formed from those years and those experiences and those lifelong experiences.
So when you came back, did you go off to do commerce at ANU?
I did.
You did? Okay.
I did. Yep. And enjoyed university quite a lot. It was... I was a pretty social individual, and I'm still quite social, as people that know me would be well aware of. And I've got a pretty broad network of people. Actually, the reason for doing accounting as well, with that in the major of the commerce degree, is probably predicated upon numbers being universal. And I'd always sort of thought that travel would be something which I'd end up doing at some point throughout my career. And so that was the decision to get into accounting. I didn't actually have an inclination that I'd end up in insolvency, but I finished up with. Or actually, it was in my last year at university where I picked up, and I'd say it was an internship with RSM Bird Cameron. Worked with RSM for a couple of years in their business advisory compliance team. Was doing some audit as well, and got a full-time role with them after graduating, and worked with them for another probably 18 months as well. So I've had a pretty broad experience, quite different from the gardening and the landscape labouring. But it's university, and being in Canberra was a great experience.
I'll just go back a bit to something I picked up on before, and you said you didn't have an iota of an idea. I'd love to see the translation of that from you to your then employer, trying to explain what iota means. So, all right. So, having made that start, what was the thing that got you here to Geelong and living in Geelong? And I know you've got a young family down here at junior school age, I believe.
Yes.
Good. And so what was the catalyst to end up here in regional Victoria?
Well, where do we start with that? I think it was... I'd been working, so I transitioned from RSM to a boutique insolvency firm in Canberra, and I'd been there about 6 years. And for whatever reason, I don't know how it actually eventuated, I got the opportunity to work overseas and spent 4 years travelling around with my now wife. And we got to the point where it was either stay overseas and make a permanent move, or come back to Australia. And we made the decision to come back. So that was decision number one. And the next decision is where on the continent are we going to end up? And as much as we love Canberra, we couldn't see ourselves back there, albeit that the lifestyle is absolutely brilliant. I didn't really have a desire to work or live in Sydney or Melbourne. Sort of big metropolitan cities, like growing up in the country, don't really appeal. And so we sort of shortlisted a handful of regional cities within Australia on the eastern seaboard, more so, where we saw lifestyle, opportunity, and in a place where we really, really wanted to put down roots and become part of the community, and really just and bring up a family, really. And as good fortune would have it, Geelong was at the top of that list. And we look back at it with quite fondness. Is that coming to Geelong the first time is we left our flat in Canberra fully furnished, rented out. And the experience of driving down the Melbourne Road with the car full of suitcases on my road bike with me, and thinking, this is the first time we've actually been to Geelong. And got to the waterfront. We had a couple of weeks down at View Apartments to find a permanent rental, and we sort of haven't looked back from there. It's all been quite a positive experience. I think that I feel like I've been welcomed in the Geelong business community and the community in general. My wife's the same. There's a lot of good people, yourselves included, have actually been quite accommodating, and it's been quite refreshing. But yeah, so it was basically a selection out of any city in Australia where we thought we'd be able to enjoy both lifestyle and...
Well, I think you've made the right choice. Now, just get back to your current role at Worrells and insolvency and restructuring. There's been a hell of a lot of press, and you don't know what to believe and what's fact and what's made up. And there is, I guess, a thought going around that as a result of COVID, a lot of businesses are struggling. And I know that you're in that area where you probably have to pick up the pieces at times. But what's your experience on how businesses actually survive COVID? The genuine ones that got hit hard, had to make whatever changes were necessary and have survived it. How do you think they handled that? Or what was the method they used?
I don't want to go down the path of saying they've all successfully, is it pivoted?
No, we don't use that word. That's a swear word.
I think that was used a bit too often over the last couple of years. I think the businesses that have been able to survive and probably thrive during the period have been quite fortunate to have good management and probably good advisors with them as well, which has ensured that they were focusing their attention at working on the business rather than being in the business at the coalface. Because I think in a crisis, if you're too entrenched in the business and working in it, is you lose sight of the factors that you really need to be aware of to be able to adjust or make those hard decisions as well. And I guess that's as well in a situation where you've got the right advisors helping you along the way as well. For the ones that have found it difficult, the ones that have probably found it most difficult may have missed out on opportunities as well with stimulus. I've heard of a number of enterprises which were, for instance, with JobKeeper, which were just missing the 30% qualification test and the like. The good ones have really have been quite good at managing the business and working through it and making the hard decisions, mind you, as well, to adjust.
So, Scott, we were chatting before we got on air that there was lots of predictions that the insolvency tsunami will overtake the world, and it hasn't happened. or has it happened?
It certainly hasn't happened, and I don't think that it is going to be a tsunami as much as it's been reported in the media, and it's still being reported in the media from time to time. I think at the moment what's happening is the few of the factors that are sort of coming together, which is the return of the old commercial credit markets are actually becoming pre-COVID or returning to that level. And I think with that is that for the last couple of years there's been a very small number of insolvencies. I think for the evidence out there suggests that it could be 40-50% below the long-term average for the number of formal insolvencies occurring. And with that is that there is going to be a bit of an increase to a natural increase to return it back to that long-term average. I think the best example from a statistical point of view, which people might be interested in, would be the ATO, and it's public information, is that pre-COVID, on average, they'd be having to file winding up applications and wind up businesses to the volume of would have been 12 to 1,500 a year, and so they're naturally a significant statutory creditor in the market. And during COVID, they would have issued less than 50 winding up applications, and I think that then brings it to where we're at the moment. As another bit of sort of evidence is that the government debt book is increased by at least 60-70%, and so that's directly impacted the volume of insolvencies that we're seeing, and we saw. But to look at it at the moment is we're not seeing an immediate return to what it was pre-COVID in terms of collection activity. It's a slow, methodical process to get back to that point. And admittedly, it makes economic and commercial sense because we couldn't have hundreds of winding up applications being filed each week or each month for that matter. And with that, from what we're seeing, it's just a slow, steady build with the insolvency volumes.
So a question for you that unfortunately you get probably called in when it's too late to save and you're there. What are 3 or 4 things that if the business had acted on earlier that's sort of common across those businesses, Scott, or a couple of tips that if a business is not reading the signs, what should they be looking for?
The first thing is probably going to be just a decrease in revenue. Whilst a decrease in revenue is always going to be an indicator, is that it's probably what I like to refer to as a lag indicator. So it's usually a representation of something that's happened to decrease the revenue, which is going to be a lead indicator. So it could be competitor opening up next door, or somebody sort of having a short-term undercutting of the market. And so if that identification of the lead indicator is something which isn't capable of being changed, well, then it becomes a question as to, well, is this still a viable business model, and what do we need to do? And if we can't do that, well, then it's seeking the advice to be able to see what options are out there. Other factors that jump to mind would be, are we able to retain staff at the current rates, or are we able to increase our wage or our payroll to be able to keep moving products or offering services? And again, it comes back to the viability of the business model. So that's probably from a technical sense, the P&L side of the equation. And from a balance sheet perspective is looking at the working capital, making sure that there's sufficient working capital just set aside for those, I'd hate to say it, another black swan moment as we've had, but having that available. And also in terms of a cash perspective is taking the time to actually sit down and actually do some element of cash flow forecasting, spending some time revisiting the actuals, and then almost sensitivity testing future scenarios. And if the position is deteriorating, is then probably taking a backward step and just going, what is actually happening? How can we rectify the situation? And if it's not capable of being fixed, is then probably reaching out to like a trusted advisor to understand where to from there.
Yeah, sorry, Mark. On that, I'll give you an example of 2 or 3 clients that I've had over COVID. Is that the ones who have survived the best are the ones that actually had capital and had an amount of money for no other reason than I kept insisting that they do this. They had cash reserves, in other words. And it's interesting that only this morning I was doing a SWOT analysis with somebody, a good old SWOT analysis that never fails. And on the threats, I wrote in big letters, pandemic. And that led on to another thing, was exactly what you just mentioned. Okay, we got to now, or he had to, I've suggested, go and work on a cash flow forecast, a rolling cash flow forecast. And into that, build a contingency into that cash flow forecast. And just put that money away. Or I know he might need it, or it doesn't matter whether you need it or not. It's the pandemic's not over. That's my opinion. So get some cash reserves, and then if things do come back to what people call the new normal, then you've got that buffer there. But it's this cash flow forecast. I've been doing, and I've mentioned on other podcasts, the judging of some business awards, and it amazes me how many finalists haven't done cash flow forecasts. I'm absolutely staggered. Anyway, they've survived, but only just. But the big issue is treat pandemic as a threat to your business. It might come again. It might not, but it's contingency planning. As simple as that.
And I think, and Scott touched on it, trusted advisors is really, really important. A good accountant should be your best friend in some of this stuff in providing you with those forecasts and helping you understand the figures and questioning, because sometimes when you're in that business, you don't want to hear the bad news and you don't want to see it'll be okay. Whereas if you've got someone asking you the right questions, it'll help you get to the point where it's not Scott knocking on your door saying, I'm sorry, but I'm here to talk to you. So,
absolutely.
All right. Now, talking survival, Scott, I'm going to get a bit personal now. And it's about persistence, and it applies in business as well in personal life. Unfortunately, you went through a fire where you live.
I did.
And you suffered some pretty severe repercussions.
I did.
Would you like to just briefly tell our listeners about what happened and how you got over it?
Yeah, certainly.
That is, if you have gotten over it.
Oh, I think I have. It's been a long journey. But it was an interesting experience when we did have the fire. It was a complete accident where we were woken up at, it would have been 2 o'clock in the morning by our dog wanting to get out of the house for the reason of the fire. And looking back at that evening, it was quite interesting because it was an air of bravado on my part where it was the proud house owner with his family sitting outside wondering what on earth he's doing still out in the backyard and in the house trying to save the house. And didn't realise at the time that the evidence was in our AstroTurf in the backyard, where you could see my footprints actually melted into the grass. And at the time, at that very instant, I didn't actually realise that I'd suffer any burns or ailments from the 15 minutes, I think it was. It may have been less than that. And ended up spending a little bit of time here at the Geelong Hospital, and then unbeknownst to me, and much to my frustration, is that I didn't get to enjoy the view from the helicopter when I was put in that to go up to the Alfred. So it was a harrowing experience with that, and as much as my nature is, I'm quite akin to making jokes about it. but that's probably with the passage of time permitting me to do that. I think there's a few life lessons to come from it. One of those is sort of the value of family and how much they do actually come together and help. And I think as well as probably from a business sense is that during that period of time it was quite amazing just how much Worrells actually appreciated me and looked after the business here in Geelong, and then also ensured that I was right to come back, because it was a pretty long road back. It was a good 2 months out of the office, which was pretty hard to deal with, because I do remember when I was at the Alfred, and I've come through from the couple of days of being looked after there, and I told my wife that I'd be, could you just bring our managing partner and tell him I'll be back in the office by Friday. And then 8 weeks passed, and I think that following Monday I was back in, so I was out for a good while. But I mean, to go back to sort of the Worrells as a family of sort of business owners they were absolutely brilliant. And I think from that I've learnt as well that being a business isn't always fun and nice, but I mean, when you can trust the people that you're in business with, and you know that everyone's got the same approach and ethos, it's invaluable, because then you can just go about looking after the clientele and also making sure that you're doing the right job in the best way you can do it. There's been many of them. There's probably countless. Actually, one of the learnings I had, it's probably not a life lesson, is we'd only been in Geelong for 4 years, and one of the things I did take away from it was just how caring the community was, because in the weeks afterwards, when I didn't have any work calls coming through to my mobile, I had countless people ringing up just to check in and see how I was going. I think I was responding to emails and phone calls from people just checking in, which was it was just brilliant looking back at that. That was a real game changer for us in terms of being part of the community, which we're grateful for.
That's really interesting about the way the employer, was so considerate and thoughtful of you and your family, and in travels, and once again I refer to this business judging thing, which I seem to be harping on lately, is that the strong ones and the people who really rise above everyone else in the judging are those that found a way to look after their people during COVID. And some of the stories and some of the innovation they put in place to keep people was amazing. And I had one only last week where she didn't lose any staff during COVID, but they didn't have any work. And the number of things that they did to help people. And I think that's been one of the lessons of COVID, is business is about doing business with people. That's what it's all about. Yeah.
Probably even more so in the current environment when it's such a tight market as well, across many industries. Respecting and looking after staff is a key part of any business. It's a significant part of our business.
So what do you do outside of work, Scott? What's your interests and activities? Bike riding, I assume,
Bike riding is one of them. We're at that period of our lives where my hobbies usually revolve around teaching my children how to ride bikes, how to play golf, how to do all those things, because we've got a little girl who's 6.5. We've got a 3.5-year-old. And it was just on the weekend where our little girl had her 10-month milestone. So all of my hobbies have kind of taken a back seat. But typically I'd either be on the bike, in the pool, just trying to stay reasonably healthy, as you kind of do spend a bit of time sitting down with your feet under the desk. if anyone wants to play a game of golf, I'm usually there 15 minutes before they've told me to be there, because I just love the game. If there's any sport opportunity, I'd be there. Other than that, it's like spending time as a family, and now that we can do it, probably venturing out into regional Vic, or just spending time with family away from Geelong as well on holidays.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, Mark and I have got some colleagues, and let's say that caravan sales have gone up. And when you hear a podcast, which we're going to release next week before yours, this gentleman and his wife just did nearly 20,000 Ks around Australia on a caravan. So I can just see you and the kids out there, campfire, and away you go. You just have to add fishing to your hobbies.
So maybe not the campfire.
Oh, sorry. Me and my big mouth.
So thank you, Scott. Thanks for sharing your adventure in life with us, and wish you well at Worrells with the family and in the future. And it's been a privilege to chat with you and learn your story. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, brought to you by Barwon Southwest Mentors. If you'd like to know more about how we can help your business, look at smeadvisory.com.au for contact details.